What up? What up? Welcome to another episode of The Extra Point, part of the Fantasy Football Network. As always, I'm your host, Phil Ruskin, joined by my boy, Kendall VanDerBilt. Kendall, let's take the people through a Dynasty Superflex Startup, only the first three rounds, talking about the best and worst picks of this first three rounds. Rookie drafts are done. We are in the summer. We're looking at best ball. We're looking at Dynasty. So I know a bunch of people out there, of course, are doing startup drafts. So let's talk about these best and worst picks of the first three rounds. Look, obviously no quote unquote bad picks in the first round. So Kendall, why don't you start us off with your best value pick here in the first round in a 12-team Superflex format?
So for me, historically, I haven't always been on this take. In fact, I think most of the competitive dynasty community was definitely on especially with the emergence back when three wide receivers kind of was a little bit new. We were talking about the age range in terms of value and what you get at wide receiver and how much longer of a career it is. But what we've seen in the NFL when it comes to a role standpoint with the running back position is that there is a very large disparity between the amount of teams that have these committee backs. We saw guys like Kenneth Walker, who was an incredible talent in the draft, drafted insanely highly, get Charbonnet, right? We're seeing more and more of that. So what we see increasingly in the trade market, when you look at the values, right, and then what's happened in startups to elevate the ADP, is that Bijan and Gibbs have clearly separated themselves from pretty much every other running back in the game. They're young, they're killing it. They're not very brittle, but the big thing there is their role. They've established a commanding NFL fan base, team, coach, production. They're just the guy, right? That you could call them the number one option in their respective offenses on several sides of the ball. So for me, I don't like about 95% of the running backs that are available to draft. And so if I can secure one of those two guys in the first round, it opens up a lot of different builds that I want to draft, where in so many rounds where someone might feel obliged to take a reasonable value running back that they maybe don't otherwise want to pick, and there's a better wide receiver, because I think you'll see the theme in this video. There's value in wide receiver in basically every round, the entire draft. And I'm talking through round 20, there's wide receiver value. So for me, the best value in round one, you need a first half pick to do it, but I want to grab one of Bijan or Gibbs.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Super foundational. They're young. There's not a lot of competition, if really any competition in their backfields right now. The expectation, of course, is that they both will reset the market when they do get their contract extensions. So for your dynasty team, no better picks, I think, with the Bijan or Gibbs. It's important, if you are watching the video here, to make sure you understand that the screen that you see here is actually sourced from 7 different sites. It's a compilation of the fantasy footballers, the football guys, fantasy pros, 4for4, Dynasty Data Lab, Sleeper, and Keep Trade Cut. So we took all of that data, compiled it, averaged it out. So that's where this ADP is coming from. If you're looking at the board here and wondering where these players were slotted based off of that information, that's how we came up with it. My best pick of round one here is in a super flex league is going to be Lamar Jackson here at the 111. I just see a world where it is, again, possible for him. Last year was kind of a lost season, but certainly within his range of outcomes to be the overall QB1. His floor, of course, probably that QB4, QB5. Everything that we talk about in Dynasty always presumes health. Kendall, you and I play Dynasty in a 2 to 3 year window, and obviously we're looking to maximize our ceiling as well as try to win a championship, hopefully multiple championships in that 2 to 3 year window. So if you're telling me that I could be at the end of the first round at the 1-2 turn and still get a foundational piece at the quarterback position like a Lamar Jackson with that rushing upside, even in a 4-point and a 6-point, he's valuable. Obviously in 4-point, he's going to be more valuable with the rushing upside that he has. But if I could come back in round 2 and grab a foundational wide receiver, if I really, really want to corner the market at tight end, I don't personally build that way, but I know some folks like to, or go and grab some of the running backs that we'll talk about here in round 2. I would feel great starting my team with Lamar as my anchor quarterback, knowing that there will be falling value in a super flex league to still pick up a second quarterback in round 4 or 5. to give myself the best chance to have the highest ceiling outcome with a player who could finish at the overall number one slot in his positional category. I just don't see a world where Lamar Jackson at 111 is anything but a value. So as much as we want it all to be positive, again, no bad picks in round one, but we can't make a video that just says everyone's great. So we are nitpicking here, but we've got to find someone. Kendall, it's not a bad pick in round one, but give me a guy that maybe you have concerns about in round one, or maybe a player that, if you're on the clock, the reason you've picked this guy is if you were personally on the clock, you might take somebody who's, being drafted after this position, or this player at his position.
Yeah. So it's tough. Even when in the pre-show, when we're going over notes and going over this, it's like, I don't want to slander where we like so many players. We like all of them in the first round. But when you're in a real startup, the pressure. It's so much easier when you're just doing the theory crafting. But when you're really on the clock, you kind of find yourself in like, oh, I really want to make this pick. You had it earlier, the Drake May or Josh Allen. Like when you're really on the clock, you really got to think about it a little bit, right? And so for those folks that, let's think about it a little bit, right? I think the worst value is going to pain me a little bit. I think it's Puka Nacua, only by a hair. But let me give you the example, YouTube. So here's what we're talking about. I think that Amon-Ra St. Brown is basically a more consistent Puka Nacua, right? And so Puka definitely has a little more, overall wide receiver one upside, but there are more question marks. There is a little bit more risk. He did have some injury history in college. That's actually one of the reasons he fell in the draft a little bit was concerns over his health. I think it's the knee specifically, if I recall. Mm-hmm. And then, we've got a little bit off the field issues. I think he's going to be fine. You give kids a bunch of money. I wasn't great at that age either, right? It was crazy saying that. I'm like, I could teach everybody in this entire draft board a thing or two about life. We're older than all of them. But I just think when you look at Neighbors at the 112, right, or Amon-Ra 2 picks later, I think they're better prospect profiles. They're on teams that I trust a little bit more. I love the Rams, but I don't know what happens at the quarterback position once Stafford leaves, or if Stafford gets injured earlier, what does that do to the rest of his career? And I just think, 1 or 2 picks away in the first round it's a lot, right? Percentage wise. So I'm much more comfortable picking Amon-Ra St. Brown over Puka Nacua. Or I just think in the next round or two, there's a lot of guys that I like and maybe a foundational quarterback. So Puka's a good pick, but I think Amon-Ra 2 picks later is just a little bit better. I got to pick one person that's the odd man out, and I can't pick yours. So I got to go with Puka.
Yeah, I mean, we're not sitting here saying don't draft Puka, like don't take Puka in the first round. Of course not. But like we're going to go through a series of videos. Tonight we're doing rounds 1 through 3. Next time we do a video will be 4, 5, 6, etc., etc. We will get through an entire startup draft in this series. We've done this many times before on our live show. You got to pick somebody, right? Not everybody can be a great pick. And even in the first round, I love the way you put it. 2 picks later, maybe Amon-Ra is just a tiny bit more consistent. So again, not saying Puka's a bad selection. What I'm going to say hurts me to say it because, again, not a bad selection. Anytime you can get a positional difference maker at the tight end, that foundational piece, your Brock Bowers, your Trey McBride, that's what you have to do. I just can't, in the first round, the way that I build my dynasty rosters, justify taking a tight end over a Malik Neighbors at the 112, a Lamar Jackson I just talked about at the 111, especially in Superflex. Now, if it's tight end premium, that's a different conversation. For this particular video, look, Bowers is a fantastic player. I think he's going to have a great season, even if there's some quarterback churn here with Cousins for part of the season and then Mendoza for the other part. It was a lost year for Bowers last season, and of course, he's coming off of his rookie year as the overall tight end 1. Can he be the overall tight end 1 again? Of course he can. Is he going to be in the top 2 to 3 tight ends for the next 3 to 5 years? Absolutely, he's going to be. Here's my issue with it. Kendall, you and I talk about this all the time. We draft every single team, and we presume health. But if you lose an Amon-Ra St. Brown in the first round, if you lose a Puka Nacua, you have multiple wide receivers on your team that can fill in those points. Sure, your ceiling is going to be lower. That's the hit that you take. But if you had, let's say your dynasty roster was CeeDee Lamb and you had a George Pickens when he was in Pittsburgh, and now you've inherited a CeeDee Lamb and a George Pickens in Dallas. When CeeDee missed time last year, you're not losing as many points on your roster because you have a George Pickens. I know that's a unique example. Not everybody has the luxury of that. But at the end of the day, you're probably going to have 7 to 10 wide receivers on your team. If you're in a dynasty startup and you are pulling the trigger in the first 2 to 3 rounds on a foundational tight end, you're doing that by saying, I'm not taking a tight end until very late in this draft, which means you are going from potentially a Brock Bowers to a Dalton Schultz, right? To a Hunter Henry, to a Pat Freiermuth. So going from a Puka Nacua and Amon-Ra and Neighbors in the second half of this first round as your tight end 1 to maybe a Jalen Waddle in round 4, right? As your wide receiver 2, points per game wise isn't going to be as large of a delta hit as it is of going from a Brock Bowers to the tight end 12, the tight end 15. So I love Bowers. He's phenomenal. If you're in tight end premium, draft him. If you can get him in the second or third round, I would love it even more. We wouldn't be having this conversation, but in the first, the way that I'm trying to build for my 2 to 3 year window, it's just difficult for me to say that there is so much value there that I can justify taking him over other players who I think, 1, have a higher ceiling by themselves, quarterbacks and wide receivers and running backs. 2, I'm just not going to lose as many points per game if he's not available.
Yeah. Really like what you said there. I'll interject really quickly because these are moves that me and you have made in real dynasty leagues in somewhat of a similar situation. If you were to lose your Puka Nacua, that Devontae Adams for a late second because you're a contender. I mean, almost an immediate point-for-point swap. And this happened last year. You actually sniped that trade from me, which was pretty sad.
I did.
Grabbing a Jacoby Myers with a third-round pick, right? Spend almost nothing. And the points per game is fantastic, 14 almost. And that's a really nice injection. So I think that's a really, really good example. And I guess I'll just bring up, I'll love on you here for a little bit. You've been really nailing tight ends a lot. And actually, we both have in our kind of boom bust type of show. Yeah. You were really big on Kraft. If you're taking a Bowers, you're pretty much saying, if I have tight ends that I like later on, it just makes them a bad pick unless it's like a full hyper, full point premium, tight end premium. We're not really drafting that way. So it eliminates. I don't like draft picks that make good picks worse later on in the draft when you're good at making those good picks, right? It's sort of it's your bleed value later on. So yeah, good pick.
Agreed. Let's jump into round 2 here. This is where there is some differentiation in the consensus rankings. The ADP is a little bit different. Again, we are sourcing this across 7 sites. Probably could have gone across 10 sites, but I only have so much time in the day, and my spreadsheet only has so many variables in it. So I think for us, this is where, we got into the green room and we kind of said, oh, well, we probably both had some players that we would have both picked for best and worst, but I'm glad that we came up with this pool, give the viewers a little bit of variance. So Kendall, why don't we start on the positive end? Give me somebody, or in this case, I'm looking at our show sheet here, maybe 2 guys that you really like in round 2 that are a value for you here.
Yeah, we got a little bit of a theme here, but it's also a little bit of capitulation here. So in round 1, I said that Bijan and Gibbs, either or, really, you're just picking the position, right? The nice thing is if you have a second half pick, you still get the ability in the second round. If, one of the reasons I like your Lamar pick, or even kind of I mentioned Neighbors late, is you still get a chance at that elite hero RB1 and guys that I think are honestly going a little bit underrated in ADP. I actually have Genty basically right at the 112, 201 right there. And Achan's ADP is, I think, going to go up a little bit with the contract. Nothing too crazy, but maybe a spot or two. Yeah. So Achan or Genty, I really have as, tier 1.5. They're like right there with a Bijan and Gibbs. I think depending on what offense and situation does a little bit better, I just really look at them as completely meteorically elite. We talked about it with the Achan that, I think some of the backups there actually had a little bit of juice. And Achan was just miles better than them. And honestly, in a bad offense, I was really impressed with how much he was able to do when nothing else was happening around him and kind of making it look effortless. It didn't seem like he was running crazy or like I thought he was maybe going to get injured. It was like, hey, I'm just going to break away once or twice and catch 6 passes. And he's not even getting tackled hard in those 6 passes, right? He's just kind of running for 10 and almost going down pretty easy, kind of smart almost. So I like the ability to grab 1 or 2 of those difference makers. Same take is honestly in round 1. You get to take less bad running back picks out of some form of necessity. later on in the draft at a really nice price. And I think both of them have realistic outcomes where you're starting to look at them at the 1-2 turn and you're getting 3, 4, 5 picks of value on them. So yeah, if I can draft one of them, I'm very happy in the second round.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the position of running back here for my best player here in the second round. Again, 7 different sources we pulled this ADP from, but I also want to give you. I've got a startup draft that I am actually about to complete here, but my guy here is actually a third round player. So this is real proof, social proof of where a player that should be going much higher, in my opinion, is a value. It's Omarion Hampton. And I don't disagree with anything that you said, Kendall. I am just going to kind of come over the top a little bit and say if I was on the clock, I would take Hampton over Achane and Genty, personally. I like the Mike McDaniels offense. I don't see a lot of competition between Kamani Vidal and Keaton Mitchell. Sure that he can't play every single down, right? He's not going to be 100% snap share. No one is. But if you're telling me that those are his biggest competitions, he's not losing touches that are meaningful touches, right? He might be spelled. He might lose a drive here and there, but you're not taking him off the field and goal line. You're not taking him off of, we got to get important plays in the game where we need a first down to keep the drive alive. 2-minute drill. I expect that to still be Hampton. I'm concerned as to why the market is so low on him. Is it because of the injury that we didn't get to see a full season? Is it because we think that Herbert is going to take that step forward as a passer again and have, there's all the rumbles early on right here in May that this is an MVP caliber season for Herbert? I mean, maybe. So at the end of the day, Omarion Hampton went at the 304 in a startup that I was in here. Yeah. Which was a real shame because I was the next pick and I tried to trade up and I couldn't get him. And so I got sniped, and I got James Cook, so not sad, right? Like decent for my team, but would rather have had Hampton. Hampton is, to me, a player that, again, young, coming off of a good season, not great, but would we be drafting him at the back of the first or at least at the 1-2 turn if he had played 16? I think so, right? And I think if you look at what he's capable of doing in this offense with an upgraded offensive line, and that was the other thing we have to remember from last season, right? It wasn't just that he was injured. It was the offensive line was incredibly banged up. So if you're going to tell me that you've got Mike McDaniel coming in with Jim Harbaugh, who likes to and wants to establish the run, with a healthy Joe Alt, with a healthy offensive line, in an offense that we like and should take a step forward and has pieces, I think Omarion Hampton at the back half of the second round, or like I just said, at the 304 in a 12-team, it's even in the second round, it's a screaming value. So give me Omarion Hampton as my best pick of the second round here. So let's poke some holes in the old second rounders. Kendall, what are you thinking here as far as maybe a player? Again, we're so early in the draft, pick 13 to 25 here, 24. No bad picks, but maybe somebody that you think is being a little bit overdrafted, if that's the easiest way to say it, since there are no bad picks and really no bad players here this early.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. So my pick is going to be, and I promise I don't hate tight ends. I'm actually pretty in on both of these players in terms of like trade for, but this one is kind of fading on my list a little bit. It's Trey McBride. I think his ADP is a little rich for my blood, but this is mostly a market watch sort of buy, sell, hold take, if anything. I just really think that when you look at how the season unfolded for Arizona and for McBride in that offense in particular, we saw one of the craziest, like throwing 50 passes a game, like unreal numbers, like numbers that no successful team ever really wants to do. Andy Reid with a Patrick Mahomes never wants to throw the ball as much as Arizona tried to do down the stretch. And they had nobody. Right. I mean, they had players, but I mean, let's call it what it is. They had 0 running backs, so they just couldn't run the ball at all, which means even at the goal line, they're just not getting in. So McBride all of a sudden comes in all these touchdowns because they can't possibly run it in. There's no one to vulture them. Their uber wide receiver 1 and Marv, just not quite there yet. Right. I don't think he figured out how to really, separate and make it click. I still think he's got good ball control, good body skills. And I do think he's going to take a leap. If he gets just a little bit better, I think the ball's going to start going his way more. I do think they have an emerging wide receiver too in Wilson, who's a second round NFL pick. Obviously, he showed he's got some gas, right? So the range of outcomes for McBride for me, I played Dynasty a long time, and I like players that perform, but I want to be very cognizant of when I think a player has hit just a real ceiling outcome. And sure, when there's real ceiling outcome, you got to weigh the how likely is it to repeat, or is he going to go down by like 1 point per game, 2 points per game? What's the full range? I think when we redraft in coming years, even just startups the following year, I can easily see McBride just going back to like the middle of the second, or I really think he's more or less like a 2-3 turn guy than where he is now. If he just has a really good season but falls back to earth a little bit, and you lose that like, oh, league winner. No, he's just really awesome, but he's not a league winner. Immediately, the rest of this round seems more appealing in a lot of different ways. So for the reason that you're buying him at an all-time high, in my opinion, even if he falls 4 picks, I've got to find somebody that I think is going to fade. You think Hampton's going to be at the 1-2 turn. I kind of agree. I think a lot of the players we pick are going to go up maybe half a round, 2 to 3 picks. I think he goes down 3 to 4 picks. You got to pick somebody. I think he had the best season of his career most recently.
It's very possible. I mean, I only own, and all across my entire Dynasty portfolio, I only own McBride in one league, and I was very fortunate that I drafted him either at the end of the third, or he was a waiver wire fab guy. You know what I mean?
Same
so it's
here,
like I didn't spend anything on him, and he basically, you it's your lottery, it's your Puka Nacua of wide receivers, right? It's your lotto ticket from your rookie draft that you were just fortunate enough to either you had the foresight, or you had the belief, or you just, hey, I need a guy, and this is my guy. So again, second round, no bad players. It's hard for me to poke a ton of holes in this player's profile, but here's why I've picked him as the quote-unquote worst pick of round 2, in my opinion. It's Ashton Genty. I love Ashton Genty. We all do. We think he's going to be a star. He had great flashes at times last season on a awful team. They've just brought in their future quarterback. They have upgraded the offensive line. Kendall, the center from the Ravens. My brain just went blank. Please help me here.
Oh, well, I wasn't even...
They brought in the center. My brain's just blanking. I'll have to Google in a second. But they've brought it. So they've taken measures to make sure that Mendoza is going to be taken care of and protected. But by extension, that means Genty is going to have a better offensive line to hopefully have holes to run through, to have blocking schemes. I believe Hampton's going to take the leap in a better offense, and it's Dynasty. I just said in my last take, why is Hampton my best of round 2? I like the offense. I like the skill set. Not a ton of competition. He's going to probably go with that 1-2 turn. I have no problem with Genty going in this ADP averaged out at the 205. No problem. But I see a world where Achane, who just got paid, who has no competition, could be ahead of Genty. I see a world where James Cook, even if he has small touchdown regression, maybe somebody, even though the age he's a tiny bit older, wants that 2 to 3 year window with James Cook, who's been a perennial top 5 guy the last 2 years running and seems set up for another top 5 season. I'm in on Hampton. So I have a hard time saying that Genty, because the team is still improving, there's going to be a quarterback change. We haven't seen it yet. And that's really the basis of this. I see a world where there's at least 2, maybe 3 running backs who could go higher, and you don't know what Jeremiah Love is. We are just making a projection that Jeremiah Love is going to be the player that we've drafted him to be. So if he does turn out to be that player, I don't know that it's a lock that Genty is the RB3 off the board when he could easily be the RB4 to 6, maybe even 7, depending on your conviction with Jeremiah Love, Hampton, Cook, and Achane off of the literally a couple hours ago newly minted contract. So again, I'm not sitting here saying don't pick Ashton Genty. That's not what I'm saying at all. I just think, again, we have to find someone that we think is the quote worst pick of this round. I think if you look at a player like Trey McBride, he is clearly the tight end 2. Until we see it from Warren, until we see it from Loveland, he's the tight end 2. There is no disputing that. Some people would have him as the tight end 1. But I do see a world where there is a conversation around who is the RB3 after Gibbs and Bijan, because I do think they're in their own tier and have clearly cemented themselves atop the running back landscape in the NFL. And I just don't know that it is written in pen that Genty is the RB3, which is why it makes him my, quote, worst pick of this round. Kendall, I want to ask you this before we get to round 3, because there's some quarterbacks in here. There's some wide receivers in here. You went running back as your best values here in round 1 and in round 2. Was there anybody positionally outside of the running backs that you considered as your best value here in round 2? Because I do have someone that I think is a really good value that I kind of get my honorable mention. But I wanted to ask you first if you had an honorable mention best of round 2.
Yeah. So it's interesting because there's only 3 wide receivers, and that's where my mind jumps to initially. But I think London is just fairly priced. He's not like screaming to me. The name that's really calling out to me, and I'm just giving it a real brief once over. I'm going to mention 2 names quickly. One, I couldn't be more in on Caleb Williams, but you can't put him any higher. You just can't. You just can't. And I want to if I can, but I can't. I think it's Herbert. I'm getting more and more in on Herbert.
That's mine.
You're jumping in with that Hampton take of, man, like Slater and then Joe Alt. Like, I mean, if they're healthy and killing it, like, remember when Herbert was like the 103, 104 in Dynasty with that? I mean, just a silky smooth deep ball to a tight end that I'll never remember, or 3 tight ends that I'll never remember. How many 60-yard passes did he do to tight ends? I don't understand. I just think they've got the right coaching in the room. They've got an elite run game. Their level up could be pretty meteoric. By the end of the year, we could be looking at him as a 1-2 turn, if not low on that. Like, does he flop with Jaden? I see so many worlds where Jaden's where he is and where Herbert's where he is. No offense to Jaden, right? You're just team front office. You got issues, right? So it's Herbert for me in terms of just a screaming value. I love him. If I'm forced to be, if you have that early, 102, 103 pick, the fact that you can maybe grab your Bijan Gibbs and then get Herbert in 2 and still have top 6 QB in a lot of range of outcomes, that feels great.
Well, that's what I was looking at here, and I couldn't agree with everything you said. Was spot on. He was the one that stood out for me as well, right? So I get it's difficult to kind of price him higher. Jackson Dart is a mobile quarterback. We saw a lot in this rookie season. If Burrow does what he's supposed to do in a healthy season, it's just hard for me to get Herbert higher, which is why I didn't make him my best pick of this round. But I couldn't agree more. If you want to start with, Bijan, Jamar Chase, Gibbs at the 2, 3, 4, 102, 103, 104, I feel greatest with Justin Herbert in a Superflex as my QB1. Let's jump into round 3 and let's get into, it starts to maybe entering our first tier break here. So let's start with the positive. Let's start with the negative, because it's not really negative, but I think
we'll end the show on a
happy note. So let me get your quote unquote worst of round 3. Again, you're still super early in the draft, so none of the players that we're talking about are bad players. You're not blowing or burning a pick, if you will, but there are more questions around the type of team that you're building and what's that structure going to look like, and what is your next 2 to 3 year outlook in Dynasty going to be when you get into the 3rd round here. I did this based off of, again, 7 different sources. So I know some folks I'm in one right now, which is the only reason I bring this up. Some folks might be asking about, 3rd round reversals, and we're not going to get into all that tonight. This is a true snake draft. Of course, we're not doing tight end premium or trades, anything to that effect.
And you can extrapolate these takes to fit your format.
100%.
In all honesty, right?
100%. Give us that worst of round 3, Kendall.
So my worst pick in round 3, according to this ADP set, it's going to be Jonathan Taylor coming in at the tail end of basically the 312 over here. So I actually just want to avoid all takes on his talent, because I'm actually speaking to I love Jonathan Taylor, he's awesome player, right? Because if you're off on him, then you already agree with everything I'm about to say. And I do think Jonathan Taylor is awesome, like really awesome. Honestly, underrated maybe in redraft. But for Dynasty, I have 2 takes on this. Okay, one, let's talk about flexibility. That's why he's the worst pick in round 3. When you draft your Dynasty team, you don't really know what your team is really made up of. If you draft fairly young, you guys know I do, you don't really know if you take any rookies, you don't really know what they have, right? If you take any veterans, you don't know how much they have left in the tank. You just haven't seen them this season. So you don't really know what your team is just yet. You have an idea, but you're not really sure yet. And you also haven't played any games yet. So you don't know if you're a contender. If you lose a couple and then face a bad injury, last thing you want to do is be owning a 27-year-old running back that's going to become 28, right? So I think we all kind of know that general take. You just don't know if you're a contender. And now you're in a position where you should be, right? If you are in a position where maybe you could trade out a little bit and play for next year, let that unfortunate injury kind of lead in your favor, right? Give you a better pick next year, you'll lead to a better, longer window. You're kind of stuck with this aging asset, right? So it's the value bleed that I think is really tough to take any player in the third round that I expect is going to fall in value immediately. I mean, this is driving the car off the lot knowing when you bought it, it's the most valuable it's ever going to be, which means if you don't win your league drafting Jonathan Taylor in the third round, it's just immediately a terrible pick because he just gets a lot. There's no way he's even in the third round next year. And so I'm going to add that with a little bit of mass psychology. I'm going to give you some players that I think in previous years, I think we would have let them age and still be valuable in fantasy. But rookie fever is a real thing. There's more rookie content than ever. Dynasty is definitely more popular than it's ever been. I think it's really taken a hold in the community now that fantasy football is very mainstream. It's really out there in the media and good stuff. And I really enjoy that. But guys like DK Metcalf, 27, Michael Pittman, 27, 28, even during and after really great seasons, give them all like a better outcome too. I can name some other players that did have good outcomes. The fact is that as it's gotten more popular, people are just not going to give you the picks or the trades that you want to get out of that player anymore. You own them forever at that point. It didn't used to be that way even 2 or 3 years ago, just in my opinion. I think I used to be able to get in low and then get out kind of for what I paid, but take the value with me for that championship run. I don't think you get that anymore. So I think you're facing a serious value cliff. And for those reasons, there are players that I think, looking in round 4, we were just talking about this when we're in pre-show about trading down. There's quarterbacks in the next round that are pretty much guaranteed going for 2 firsts, like minimum. And JT, I don't think you get 2 firsts from him right now. So he's worse than half of the 4th round too. Yeah. So for those reasons, I love the talent. I think he's going to be an amazing redraft pick. I cannot justify taking him in the 3rd round. And I'll be honest, I wouldn't take him in the first half. I probably wouldn't take him in the 4th round if I'm being real.
It's hard when he's done what he's done to say that JT is a bad pick, but the age cliff, the contract year that I just mentioned, like what if Daniel Jones doesn't come back like he was off of this Achilles injury and then they have no quarterback? That's when JT fell off of the cliff last season, is when Daniel Jones went down. He was a league winner for you the first half of the year. The second half of the year, you kind of had to close your eyes, plug your nose, and just hope for the best, and it's difficult. So I'm with you. My worst player or worst pick of the 3rd round is at the 311 here. It is Nico Collins. Look, I'm going to talk about his age in a second, but that's not the reason I think he is the worst value pick here. You
can say anything you want to, man.
I know you're not a Nico guy, so you smile ear to ear on this one. But I'm a data guy. I want social proof and I want data sets to show, not make every single decision in analytics, right? Because not everybody should be drafted 13th overall. Cough, cough. Wink, wink, hint, hint. Certain team down there in Southern California. As a Niners fan, I loved that pick until we blew ours. But I'm looking at wide receiver 86, 77, 12, 23, 8. But we still continue to treat Nico as though he is a locked and loaded wide receiver 1. And I don't think he is. I think he is a fringe wide receiver 1. He has his own injury history. Now I'm going to bring up his age. He is turning 27. We need CJ Stroud to become what we thought he was going to be off of the back of his rookie season, which we have not seen. So we are still waiting and hoping to see that step forward this year as he now gets into year 4. And don't forget this, the Texans have an elite defense. They don't need to score 30 points, 40 points a game to win. They can win a game 23-19. And if Nico doesn't catch a touchdown, you are not happy. So I look at, we're not going to talk about these guys tonight, but I don't believe age is everything. But I will say, when I get to a place in a draft where I start to struggle with with a pick, then I say, is it time to pivot positionally? Okay, I don't love the wide receiver in this range. Is there a quarterback here? Is there a running back here? Do I want to be a guy that takes an early tight end to cement a foundational piece of my offense? Or do I want to take a Devonta Smith, a Lad McConkey? Would I rather have one of these rookies? Do I believe enough in Carnell Tate? I know you're a Rome guy. Am I going to take a Luther Burden or a Rome because they are younger? And I think there is a world not only where they could outscore Nico, but they are younger. So now if they can outscore Nico, do I have 2 or 3 more extra years of runway when these guys are 24, 25, maybe 26, and Nico's turning 30, 31, and is likely either already had his decline or he's just, you're left holding the proverbial bag. So I don't want Nico at the 311. I'll be honest, in startups, I just pass and I do exactly what I just did. I'm either pivoting to a different position or I'm looking for a younger wide receiver with, I think, a similar range of outcomes and a ceiling. Devonta Smith is going to vault up this board as soon as the A.J. Brown trade is official, assuming the A.J. Brown trade is official, whenever that occurs. That's a player that we'll talk about in the next series video. And don't forget about this guy because he has been left for dead, BTJ. So there are players out there, wide receivers, that I think I would, not in the third round, but there are players, a Devonta Smith, a Lad McConkey, maybe one of these rookies, Carnell Tate, a Garrett Wilson, for example. Those are players that if I'm going to take a receiver at the back of the third, that's who I'm targeting. That's who I'm going to pull the trigger on. Let's wrap the show with positivity, Kendall. Let's talk about the best player that you think was drafted here according to the consensus ADP in round 3. Give us your best of round 3.
Yeah, so for me, best of round 3 is going to be Teteroa McMillan, coming in at the approximately the 310 in this ADP set. And this is actually a player that I've taken here quite often. If you caught any of our mock drafts, we do a ton of mock drafts on the channel. It's definitely something we'll be known for. So if you like drafting, come check us out. We do a ton of it, and we have a really competitive group. So no auto drafters. It's always really, really competitive. A lot of sniping. We reach down for all kinds of juice, and your queue is going to get toasted. So I've started with a lot of Drake May or one of the running backs, from like 103 to 105. And I'm usually in love with taking Tet McMillan in the third round. A lot of good things going for him, right? One, had a crazy season with a quarterback I hate, right? Marv was kind of meh with, I think, okay quarterback play, and I hate Bryce. He can't even see where he's throwing the ball, and Tet was still doing some things. Really sneaky eye for the red zone, reminded me a little bit of Calvin Ridley. When I watched a lot of highlights with him, try to figure out as Bryce is running around just how he got open, he seemed to have a real mind for getting open in the red zone. So I think a lot of things that indicate success, right? He had an early big target share often that I think goes up. An offense that was kind of okay, mostly leaned a lot on the run game, to be honest. Like Rico was really doing his thing. Him and Chuba as a 1-2 punch on an above average offensive line was really what was moving the chains for the most part. But when it came to actually scoring, right, that was a lot of Tet. So I can't do T-Mac. I watched too much Tracy McGrady back in the day. It's not going to happen. Tet, you got to live with it, man. So yeah, I think he's great. If you start without a wide receiver, and oftentimes I am starting without a wide receiver into the third round, I'm very happy with him as my wide receiver 1. Young, elite. His situation, there's so few windows where it gets worse for him. If Bryce gets better, awesome. Bryce can't really get a lot worse, and even if he does, I don't know how much that affects a main red zone, wide receiver 1 weapon in run heavy offense, right? Everything was already stacked a little against him, and he overcame it. I think he could take a Drake London leap forward, next year. I think he could be up where London is at if he does take that step forward. If Bryce can continue to learn and be a little more all right, I've been in this league long enough, I know how the NFL functions, and just gets a little better, extending the play, doing a little Russell Wilson in his prime, who's kind of a short king too, making some things happen. I think, I won't say the sky's the limit. I don't think he's ever going to be Mike Evans in his prime, but I like him a lot, and I'm very happy with him as my wide receiver 1. I'd see him probably moving up half a round, if not a full round, going into next year if he repeats this kind of success 2 years in a row. Love him.
I'm going to go with a player from the same draft class, but almost an entire round later. Emeka Egbuka. We are not going to Emeka Egbigbu him. It is Emeka Egbuka. I almost did it to myself twice there, Rob Gronkowski. Look,
We
it
don't edit
was.
anything, by the way.
Yeah, I
This
know
is a
we don't.
big
Right?
deal.
It was fire for 5 weeks, and then it was ice for 3, then a bye week, and then fire in week 10, and then we know how the season ended. So I understand the inconsistency, but you have to look at number one, rookie season, adjusting to the NFL. Even though he came out and killed it, Egbuka is not Jamar Chase. He's not Justin Jefferson. There's a reason why those guys came out and killed it their rookie seasons and then kept killing it. They are the elite of the elites. That's why they are the top two in the tier of their own. I know Jefferson's got some quarterback issues, but it took JSN a couple seasons to get going. Right? People were frustrated with JSN. Is he ever going to get a quarterback? Is he going to get the ball? All the Seattle wants to do is run the ball. He's the third guy there because Metcalf and Lockett were still there. So I think there is a reason to be optimistic about Egbuka because you saw it. You saw it early. It's the same quarterback. It's the same scheme. It's the same offensive coordinator. So I think there is a world where Egbuka is ahead of Nico, ahead of Olave, ahead of Pickens, possibly ahead of Tet. And you're talking about him in that Drake London kind of tier, maybe at the bottom of that tier, but he's in that range of outcomes. He's in that tier at 23 years old in an offense that Chris Godwin will probably not be a part of next season. This is probably Godwin's last year there. You and I like Tez. We like Jalen McMillan a lot. They just took Ted Hurst, but these are not players that are going to displace Egbuka. There is no tight end that's a target hog. It's Cade Otton. And I mean, sure, things could change next year in the draft, but you've got a pretty well-established backfield with Bucky on a rookie contract, and you've got a newly added Kenny Gainwell. So it's not like they drafted, an elite wide receiver to come in here to compete with Egbuka. He's the guy. He's the guy going forward. I expect Baker to probably finish his contract and his career in Tampa. So you continue to mind meld and get that receiver quarterback relationship built up. And at the end of the third round, if it was me and I was on the clock, I would take Egbuka over Nico and Chris Olave personally. I would have a hard time if George Pickens was not on a franchise tag. Had he had a contract, I still can't get Egbuka ahead of Pickens. But because he's on the franchise tag and it's a dynasty league and not a redraft league, we don't know where he's going to be next year. What if he's playing for the Jets with a rookie quarterback and Garrett Wilson and Sadiq and Brees? I don't know where Pickens is going to be. And I'm just not a Bryce Young believer and truther. So I just don't know that the volume is going to ever be there enough for Tet to truly reach superstardom. Whereas I think Egbuka, because we've seen flashes of it, could get there. So at the 312, give me Egbuka at the end of the third round as my wide receiver 1. And if he somehow is my wide receiver 2, I am on cloud 9 as we move forward. So
couldn't agree more.
That is going to wrap this video. If you like what you heard tonight, please make sure that you subscribe at the Extra Point FFB over on YouTube. Of course, check us out at the Fantasy Football Network. Kendall is the Fantasy Football Tavern. We've got mock drafts. We've got dynasty leagues. We'll have best ball content. We have a ton for you. We do some live shows. We do pre-recorded videos like this. So again, if you like the content, please like and subscribe, and we will continue to do more. Find us over on Sleeper. You can DM me at PRuskin. I will always answer any questions you have about dynasty startups, trades. Kendall and I do a ton of trade shows. So we are men of the people. We will be here for you, whatever your dynasty needs. So thanks for joining us here for another quick video on the Extra Point. We out.